Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. So first up for D&D today, we have the Disaster Squad mug. I almost said the Erice mug. Erice is a location on here. The Disaster Squad mug that my home game party made for me that I love very, very much. I use it very often, actually. More often than not, I use it in the morning, so I'm kind of surprised that it is, clean right now and able for me to be able to be used while I'm shooting this. Anyway, then inside we have some lemon zinger from Celestial Seasonings. I did not bring the box in here, but I have the wildberry zinger sitting right next to me, and it's the exact same thing, except this part's yellow and it says lemon, and this is just a picture of a lemon instead of all these other fruits. Imagination will get you exactly where you need to go. But it's very good. It's very lemony. So if that's something you're into, highly recommend it. It's also caffeine-free herbal tea. So if you're at the end of a day, then you can go ahead and throw that in there as well. And you don't have to worry about it keeping you up at all. But that's not what we're here to talk about. You know that. I know that. Instead, we're here to talk about something very, very specific that I didn't really realize I was ever going to be really involved in talking about, because so often I am a huge supporter of playing your characters to be bullheaded and stupid. So the fact that we're going to sit here and talk about power building today is a little interesting to me, because the reality of the situation is that I do not play characters that are power build. I will play suboptimal characters a lot, actually, because I really think that I would rather have the experience of telling the story with the character in the most true to the story that I am trying to tell way possible, as opposed to playing it as, a character that is just very, very good at something in particular. Because the reality is you end up being good at stuff when you play the character according to the story, because you're good at that story then. And so you get a similar sort of satisfaction out of it. However, I know a lot of people that are very into power building. I know a lot of people that are very into trying to be the best at things that they can be. And I am a competitive pain. So I am very, very aware of and understand how to do a lot of power builds. It was part of my whole TikTok profile for a very long time. I would do stupid D&D character builds where I would power build, quote unquote, and it's going to be the way that I go about it in this episode here. But it was being excessively good at one singular thing, and that's it. Nothing else. You are only good at that one thing. So I figured, you know what? Let's talk about it. Maybe I'll talk to somebody who's an actual power builder at some point here, because they like to focus on damage. They do things that really ramp up like the damage output and around. My power builds are a little bit more all over the map. They are, again, just a weird conglomeration of things that could be entertaining to use in one very specific situation, and that is it. So, with all that said, let's go ahead and let's get into it, because I think that this is an interesting kind of topic. Again, not one that I was thinking that I'd really ever be talking about on this show. So, first things first, as I mentioned, I don't power build my characters. However, I have and will in the future, and honestly, would not be surprised if it was something that I really did pretty consistently and not just every once in a while. I have and will continue to power build NPCs that my players get to play alongside of, for the reason that I do not stack NPCs with crazy magic items or anything like that like I do my players. I give my players yards and miles worth of advancement via their magic items that they end up with, and I don't give my NPCs stuff like that. So they are built to be very good at the thing that I want them to be good at, and that is it. Because the reality is that I could also write them out of the story pretty easily. Like, I could have them take a left turn at that road, and then the PCs don't see that one NPC that is incredibly good at tracking and navigating again until after the fight with the dragon comes through, and they have the assistance of that other NPC that's really, really good at fighting if they need that. So, I power build my version of power build. It's not necessarily the most widely accepted one, but it is my version of it. I power build my NPCs sometimes. Oftentimes I don't. I just create them as like average base level people, but I do enjoy a good optimized character every once in a while for my NPCs in particular. So let's go ahead and let's start talking about it a little bit. With my process, with the way that I do it, again, fully aware that this is just the way that I do it. I know that the common thread, I guess, for power building is for you to be the most effective character you possibly can be. I just like to add in a very specific situation to the end of that phrase so that you get these insane, weird things that I come up with. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's actually a lot of fun. But what do I know? You know? So, the first step for me when I am doing this is to determine exactly what I want that character to be good at. This could be combat. It could be that I want them to be the singular greatest archer possible. It could be that I want them to be the best tracker. It could be that I want them to be able to move the fastest. It could be any number of things that I want them to be able to do. I've gone so far as to do one where they are literally just good at falling off of cliffs, and that is their thing. Like, that's their whole deal. They're good at falling off of cliffs. Period. End of story. That one was a monk barbarian combo where they would get slow fall, but also they'd be able to rage and take half damage, and the barbarian hit die gives them more hit point. It was a whole thing. It was a whole thing. But you pick your starting point. For me, it is what I like to do. The next step is one that is sort of universal, but for me, you find the thing that you want to do, and you decide on it, and you decide that that is what you're going to be. The more specific you can get, honestly, the better, because the more likely you are to be able to find the things that will actually stack onto that singular thing that you want to be able to do. Good example, I made somebody that could move incredibly fast in one round. I want to say that it ended up being somewhere around 300 miles per hour. I think that's right. And it checked out. Everything worked. It was fantastic. But it was only good at that. You could do that for one round, and then you go about half that far, or half that speed, 2 rounds later, and then from there you would have to take a nap. And by a nap, I mean a long rest, before you'd be able to do anything else again. So it very much is, excuse me, sorry, choosing the one thing you want to excel at for a very specific amount of time and following that thread. Next up, the second step, a universal step if you are power building in the more traditional sense, or if you are power building in the way that I have described it here, you need to read a lot. And I mean a lot, because the reality is that you are trying to, like, pinch through and weed out every individual semantic ruling that you could possibly find to make the thing that you want to happen work. You need to be as rules lawyery as possible in order to get yourself to the finish line in this specific scenario. So if you are trying to create somebody that deals a lot of damage, you have to understand that while it would be great to be able to go ahead and use smites and stuff like that on an Eldritch Blast, Divine Smite only activates when you hit a creature with a melee weapon attack. So that rules out spells. That also rules out like a light crossbow or something like that, where if you're trying to get extra damage in a run and you are for some reason not picking up Quicken Spell and Magic Initiate, if you don't already have access to Eldritch Blast, not the point, you cannot get your Divine Smite on a ranged weapon attack either. It has to be a melee weapon attack, which also technically means you can't smite on a monk's unarmed strike because of a whole really weird semantic thing that they failed to put into the player's handbook. It was kind of clarified in a Sage Advice, but not really. It's a whole thing. And so you have to be ready to and willing to dive into every individual word in every single one of these things. And as a baseline of that, you need to develop an understanding of what each class can do, because a lot of times for a power build, you're going to look for your 1 to 3 level dips, and that's it, so that you don't have to commit a lot to one class if it's outside of the core class that you want to be running in anyway. But you want to be like, okay, so I know that with a cleric, if I do a 1 level dip, I get a divine domain, which means I get divine domain features. If I do a 2 level dip, I'll pick up channel divinity, and so on and so forth. Like, you want to be able to have that sort of list in your head so you understand where you are picking up different features, and you are then able to actually figure out what it is that you are going to be able to stack on top of. So you have to build that basic understanding, and the only real way to do that is to read a lot. That does mean reading every subclass, every feature, every single word that goes in there. You need to read them. But also, it means that you need to read outside of the official material as well. You need to go ahead, you need to look on boards, you need to look on forums, you need to look on random news articles that people have posted, stuff like that, in order to give you a slightly different perspective on stuff as well. Because the reality is that when you get deep in the trenches with something like this, you start to only see it from your perspective, and you really need to have that shift in perspective so that you can see it from someone else's point of view. And you can probably pick up a couple of tips and tricks from there that, you know, you probably missed on your first pass through. And you have to be able to accept that you are not going to be totally right. And there's going to be something that is going to change a little bit based on what you are trying to do in this situation. So, all that said, do your reading, do your homework, do your research, figure out what it is that you want to do. Figure out what you want to do, then do your homework, do your research, and figure out what things support what you want to do. In conjunction with that part a little bit, you need to pick the level that your character is going to be. Whenever I would do my builds, I wouldn't go over level 12 if I could help it, because I very specifically wanted it to be a character that could feasibly exist in your average campaign, because your average campaign does not go past level 12. So I wanted it to be something that somebody could feasibly rock up to a table with and achieve by the end of that campaign, if that is the direction that they were trying to go. Also worth noting, in that same sort of vein, that honestly, power builds, unless they are in a wargamey power build based sort of campaign, they can get boring for you, or they can get irritating for everybody else at the table. And it's important to know that. It's important to think about that. And it's important to tell your DM if you're going to do something that you are trying to optimize for this one very specific thing. Just because you don't want to walk up to the table and then be the only one there who is dishing out, 300 points of damage in a turn, but you're also getting smacked into the next room and then complaining about the fact that you have no armor or no health because you dumped it all into your attacks. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you know what you're doing, and make sure you actually communicate with the people at your table. That's a big rule in general. Communicate with the people at your table. Highly, highly recommend that. Then step 3, after you've done all your research, is to start testing. The reality is that stuff works on paper, but it doesn't work in practice necessarily, which is a weird thing to say because D&D is played on paper. But if you have a D&D Beyond subscription or some other sort of online service like that, it is a really, really great resource in order to sort of figure out what it is that your creation is actually going to be able to do when it is being regulated by a computer that knows all of the rules and knows all of everything is programmed into it. That is a very helpful thing. If you're looking for features that work in conjunction with each other, and you're trying to see if they do in fact layer and they will show up on D&D Beyond or on a different platform that is similar, please plug them in there. Just try them out. You don't want to get to the table and then realize that you missed the word melee in a Divine Smite, and you're sitting there trying to rules lawyer your way out of it, and you just can't because you're wrong. Or similarly, if you sit down and you start arguing with the DM about everything, and the DM is getting clearly frustrated because you don't have ready sources able to back it up, then they're not going to be happy with you either. Quite frankly, you got to make sure that you check concentration on everything. You got to make sure that you check attack types, damage types. You got to make sure that things stack. Things like being unable to be affected by the same spell at the same time. Spoilers, the whole polymorph and pixies thing doesn't actually work all that well. You need to be aware of all of those things. You need to be ready to go with all of that. It's very important that you are well aware of the way that every inch of your character sheet works, which is why you have to test it out so much. If you don't test it out, you don't know all those things. And if you don't know all those things, then you're going to be a drag to have at the table, and nobody wants that. So step 4 after you finish testing is to learn the ins and out of your character sheet. Like I just kind of mentioned, you have to know every single thing that character can possibly do and the way that it all stacks up with itself. Because in order to combo out the thing that you need to do, you have to more than likely follow a very specific set of steps. You need to make sure you know that set of steps, and you need to make sure that you are not trying to relearn it every single time you try and do something. Very important. But once you have learned everything on that character sheet and you know exactly how it works, congratulations, you have a power-built character. Is it necessarily the most powerful at what it does? No, it's not. There's always going to be something that's a different take that technically allows you to do a little bit more, but maybe yours is more consistent, or you roll more dice so your average is higher even though their max is higher. There's something. It's always something. But you, in fact, have a power-built character on your hands at that point. And so I think you should be proud of the one that you do have. And then when you go back and you do it again, read some more, do a little better. And then when you go back and do it again, read some more, do a little better. Just keep incrementally working your way up. And eventually, you're going to be really, really fantastic at it. And you're going to have an insane working knowledge of the way that all of the different classes work, of the way that each of their core features works. Like people talk about all the time how nobody understands how rogue sneak attack work. I know how rogue sneak attack work because I have been doing something like that before. Funnily enough, rogues are not something that is usually super great in a power build type setting because of the amount of assumed circumstances, but that's not really the point in terms of damage output. But that is not the point of that at all. Congratulations, you have successfully made it. You have a power build character. You should be proud of it. You should try it. You should enjoy it. Then you should start over and do it all over again. That is everything with regard to that. Let's talk about the shows we have today and this weekend. We have, in no particular order here, Mayhem D&D, Off the Rails, Oxventure, Just Roll With It, The Strings of Fate, Rolling with Difficulty, The World of Low, The Crown DM, and Coming Together Naturally. Saturday, tomorrow, we have Dice Funk and Strange Hungers. And then on Sunday, we have Super Idols, Roll For Your Life, Grinning Griffin, Dungeon Drunks, Library of Nightmares, The Chaos Brigade, Rise of the Forsaken, Chromatic Dice, The Stradcast, High Rollers, and Tabletop Notch. Please let them know that I sent you. Please go check them out. All really, really phenomenal shows. I just caught up on Dungeons and Daddy, so I am actually transitioning to a new show now. I don't know what that is yet. I'm going to figure it out. But if you have any specific recommendations, let me know, because I am at least familiar with pretty much every single one of those shows on this list. So I do recommend you go take a look at them and see how they are. But that's everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So thank you so much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the episode description of this episode here. Yes, again, just a really unclean dismount from the outro to the actual sign off. I'll get it someday. It's only season 3. I've got time to figure it out. Not the point. Anyway, with all that said, don't forget, everybody. Drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.